I don't want to watch your stupid video. Just tell me what are the best tier 4 upgrades for the Brotherhood. Okay, Magneto passive, Pyro special, and Pyro ultimate. I know, that's it. What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Orange Essentials. Today we're going to be taking a look at the best tier 4 upgrades for Raid Shadow Legends. Sorry about that, the Brotherhood. We're going to be taking a look at the Brotherhood. In particular, their best tier 4 Raid Shadow Legends. What the Raid Shadow Legends? So, I think they're changing the last word of everything I'm saying until I do their ad. So we'll be right back after these Raid Shadow Legends. I want to give a shout out to Raid Shadow Legends. Raid Shadow Legends is a free-to-play epic dark fantasy turn-based hero collection RPG with over 400 collectible and customizable characters. More importantly, it's a turn-based RPG done right. Whether you enjoy curating a collection, doing dungeon runs, strategically taking down bosses, or going head-to-head with other players in PvP, there's something for everyone. I also love that this game can be played on both mobile and PC, and you can effortlessly switch between the two whenever you want. Also, now the highly anticipated Battle Pass is on. Season 1 is live and you can win awesome rewards including free energy refills, gems, upgraded artifact sets, and new epic and legendary champions by fulfilling the specified daily and weekly challenges. So you can find me in the game under the name Khasino, and if you're quick, you can also join my clan. So what are you waiting for? Go to the video description, click on the special links, and if you're a new player, you'll get 50,000 silver and a free epic champion, Hexweaver. Note that these exclusive rewards are only available for the next 30 days. Alright, welcome back. So today we are going to be taking a look at the best tier 4 upgrades for the Brotherhood. Now, the Brotherhood have long been one of the most formidable Alliance War and Blitz teams, and for mid-game players, a hybrid version of this team has been one of the top, if not the top, arena offense choice for many people. However, with the introduction of Toad and Blob, they have a renewed purpose as the hard counter to Coulson Shield teams in Alliance War. As Coulson Shield has long been one of the most difficult Alliance War defenses to get around, this is excellent news. Their wombo combo has been greatly improved, and this team is just super fun to use, and they're one of the most ruthless teams that you can be piloting in any game mode. So let's get into their T4s. Alright, starting off, we'll take a look at Magneto. Taking a look at Magneto's basic, putting the tier 4s in this ability adds 30% more damage to the primary target and 30% damage to the secondary targets. That is as standard as they come, so that's a 2-star. Alright, taking a look at the Magneto special, putting tier 4s in this ability adds 30% damage, and it goes from removing 2 positive effects to removing all positive effects. Now there are some matchups where this is very important, but there are also plenty of matchups where it's not terribly important, and a lot of times you can use this on turn 1 if you want, at which point, because Magneto goes so early, there won't be a lot of buffs that you're needing to remove, and once you get that disrupted down, it's going to prevent more buffs from being applied. So this is one of the better upgrades, but for most matchups right now, including the Coulson Shield matchup, it's not super critical, so for that reason, it's a 3-star. Now we're taking a look at Magneto's ultimate. Putting tier 4s in Magneto's ultimate adds 30% damage to the AoE. That's not great, it's pretty average for an AoE, it's actually on the lower end, so this ability is lucky to get 2 stars. And finally, we'll take a look at Magneto's passive. Putting tier 4s in this ability adds 10% resistance, 10% focus, and 10% max health, not only to Magneto, but to the entire Brotherhood. Now, this is already one of the most stacked passives in the entire game. Adding 30% worth of stats, not just for himself, but for the entire team, is excellent value, and in particular, the health and focus are really necessary for a lot of their choice matchups, where they're trying to score really big punch-ups, which is really what this team is good for. So this is one of the few absolutely necessary abilities on this team, 4 stars. Next up, we'll take a look at Pyro. So taking a look at Pyro's basic, putting tier 4s in this ability adds 30% damage. Now, there is an unseen benefit. When you level up an ability that applies a bleed, you are also increasing the bleed damage. So at level 6, bleeds applied by a character do 135% of their base damage. At level 7, they do 150%. So this basic is actually gaining 30% and then an additional 15% on the bleed. But even at gaining 45% damage, that's still a pretty standard upgrade. So in this instance, it's a 2-star. Alright, next we're taking a look at Pyro's special. So Pyro's special is actually one of the biggest upgrades in the entire game, and most people have no idea. So right off the bat, it adds 40% damage to the primary and adjacent targets, and then the 2 bleeds themselves are going to do an extra 15% damage because the ability level of the ability went up. However, it's actually going to make both of those bleeds last for an additional turn. So you're getting another 300% damage just from that ability because you're doing 150% 2 more times for the 2 bleeds. However, because those bleeds will now still be there, when Pyro uses his ultimate, that will allow him to extend any existing bleeds for another turn. So you'll actually get another 300% damage out of this ability, assuming that you're able to use his ultimate right after his special, which in 99% of cases you are. So this upgrade actually ends up generating an additional 670% more damage. It's absolutely massive, and it is unquestionably a 4-star. Alright, now we're taking a look at Pyro's ultimate. So Pyro's ultimate adds an additional 40% damage to all targets, and it extends, instead of 1 turn of disrupt for everyone, it's 2 turns of disrupt for everyone. And again, that's absolutely massive, in particular against the Fury Shield team. They love using all of their positive effects, but yeah, having multiple turns of disrupt is amazing, and the way that this can now combo with Toad to have those extended, it's really, really powerful. I believe Blob also does turn meter rewind when he hits into someone with disrupted, so there's just a lot of benefit to having these disrupted stay on the field. It's really, really strong, easy 4-star. Alright, now we're taking a look at Pyro's passive. So Pyro's passive, when you put tier 4s in, it gives an extra 5% focus, and when he's attacked, instead of gaining 10% speed bar, he'll gain 15% speed bar. Now, this is a surprisingly strong upgrade. In many, many matchups, it does not have a big impact. In particular, Pyro's not targeted that often, and the Brotherhood is usually pretty good about just quickly mopping up their opponents, and it ends up not making a big difference. And sometimes you actually want to hold off on the Pyro special, not necessarily not using the ability when you can, but hoping not to get attacked too many times, and it's because the Pyro special also dispels enemy buffs, so you sometimes want to wait for the enemy to use an ability that applies defense ups or deflects or other things like that to then have Pyro come in and remove them. So speeding him up is not always optimal in every matchup. This is a very strong upgrade, and it's certainly not a waste of the T4s, but as it's not really required for them to win any of their matchups with big punch-ups, for me, this is a 3-star. Alright, next up we'll take a look at Juggernaut. So looking at Juggernaut's basic, when you put tier 4s in this ability, it's going to add 40% more damage, and he's going to go from an 80% chance to gain ability energy to 100% chance to gain ability energy when he uses this. So the 40% damage is pretty standard, however, he doesn't basic attack that often. You're almost always going to open up with your special, and then sometimes you'll basic in between the special and ultimate, but most of the time you'll just use your ultimate right after you've used the special, so typically you're not even using this basic until turn 3, and as far as gaining the energy, 4 out of every 5 times you're going to get the energy anyway, which means most of the time this upgrade is just going to do an extra 40% damage, which is not too crazy. So for me, this is just a 2-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at the Juggernaut special. So putting tier 4s in the Juggernaut special, the only thing that is improved is instead of gaining 1 stack of regen, he will gain 2 stacks of regen. So this actually went slightly up in value in that Blob can now copy all the positive effects from other Brotherhood members, so now there's an opportunity for Blob to copy 2 regen instead of 1, but at the end of the day, a fully maxed out Juggernaut would only get an extra 20-something thousand health from that 1 regen stack, and the average maxed out character's basic attack is like 50 to 60,000 damage, so it's just not much. Certainly not great value for your tier 4s, so for me, this is just a 2-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Juggernaut's ultimate. So when you put tier 4s in Juggernaut's ultimate, he's going to gain 60% damage to primary and adjacent targets. And because we're talking the Brotherhood here, that usually means he's going to be hitting everyone on the field. So 60% is a nice damage upgrade for what's essentially an AoE. So having said that though, he doesn't typically have offense up or anything crazy like that, and his damage isn't exactly through the roof. So it's an above average upgrade, but it's nothing crazy. So for me, this is a 3-star. Finally, we'll take a look at Juggernaut's passive. So putting tier 4s in this ability does a couple things. Firstly, it gives him an extra 5% resistance, which is pretty negligible, especially when he spends a good amount of the match basically invulnerable to debuffs. And then he's going to, when he's attacked, instead of giving 15% speed bar to himself and other protectors, he's going to give himself and other protectors 20% speed bar. So that's not inherently a bad thing. In fact, it typically means after he uses his taunt, he'll be able to ult that much quicker, but it comes with the trade-off of having the Brotherhood team essentially protected for less time. Since he's going to speed through his turn, he will spend less time absorbing big attacks with the taunt up. So for matchups where the Brotherhood is going to be able to blow up all their opponents with their wombo combo, this allows them to just do it quicker and it's better, but there are plenty of matchups where the wombo combo itself is going to do some of the work and then they still have to clean up the rest, and it actually basically makes them more vulnerable for longer. So it's not a bad upgrade, but it's not great. So for me, this is just a 3-star. On to our first newcomer, Toad. So taking a look at Toad's basic, when you put tier 4s in this ability, it adds 50% damage. So with all the new characters coming out, anywhere from 30 to 50% is a pretty standard upgrade on a basic attack, and considering that this doesn't really gain anything else, it's pretty standard. So for me, this is a 2-star. Alright, now we're taking a look at Toad's special. So when you put tier 4s in Toad's special, it adds 50% damage to the primary and adjacent targets, which on the Brotherhood is usually all the enemies on the field. Maybe there's one that doesn't get hit. So it's not a bad upgrade. However, because Toad's base damage is so low, that 50% isn't really worth much. So while it's on the higher end, for me, this is just a 2-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Toad's ultimate. So putting tier 4s in this ability does quite a bit. Firstly, it increases the damage that the primary target and adjacent targets are going to take by 30% damage. Instead of removing 2 negative effects from himself, Toad is going to remove all negative effects from himself. And instead of chaining to 3 additional targets after the primary, he's going to chain to 4 or 5. So these things don't sound bad, and they're not. The problem is, in a lot of matchups, you're going to use this right away. And since Toad is the fastest person on an already fast team, you tend to use this before most of those things matter. The 30% damage is pretty negligible because it's Toad, he just doesn't have high damage. Clearing negative effects from himself would be good, but it's rare that he has more than 2 negative effects because, again, he goes before almost everyone. There aren't a lot of matchups where he's actually amassed a lot of debuffs that he needs to remove. And even if the enemy team got to go, there's not a lot of instances where they really target him and load him up with debuffs anyway. And the most valuable aspect of this is the additional targets that are going to get chained to. Normally it'll hit a primary and 3 chain targets, so it's going to hit 4 total targets. This will upgrade it to instead hit the primary and then either 4 more or 5 more, so you're going to hit either 5 or 6 total targets. Now, most enemy teams, because you're mainly using them in Blitz and War, most enemy teams, especially so early in the match before almost anyone has had a chance to even take a turn, most enemy teams just have 5 characters. So normally you would just not hit 1 character with this. So hitting the extra character is strong, but it's very rarely make or break, because usually right after this Magneto will go and blind everyone. So even in the worst case scenario situation where you're facing a Coulson shield team and it only hits 3 additional members after the primary, that means 1 person is being left untouched with their immunity, which means 1 person's attack is going to get through the Magneto blinds, and that's just not enough to sink this ship, so to speak. Blob is almost always already going to have taunt on him, and it's just not going to matter. I mean, a single target landing a single attack before the wombo combo goes down, it's usually not that big a deal. So this is one of the better value upgrades on this team, and it's definitely not a bad one to put tier 4s in, but I can't really call it essential because it's pretty often not going to matter. So for me, this is a high 3-star. Alright, now we're taking a look at Toad's passive. So Toad is going to gain 5% more dodge chance and 10% more focus for himself and his team when you put tier 4s in this ability. So both of those things are very good. The dodge chance isn't that crazy because Blob is going to be taunting for a good amount of the fight, and then Juggernaut is going to be taunting for 2 turns as well, and there's going to be plenty of blind opponents, so there aren't going to be too many attacks that actually get through to Toad in the first place, unless you're just trying some crazy punch-up where your damage is not going to do a good job of getting rid of the opponents, in which case you don't really want to be using the Brotherhood for really, really extended matches as it is, because they don't really have much sustain. The other thing that you're getting is the extra 10% focus for everyone, which again is good, but considering all the other focus that you can already get on this team, that focus is really only going to come into play to just move the needle a little bit on exactly how much you can punch up in certain matchups. So if you're using a smaller Brotherhood and you're regularly going against really big Coulson Fury teams, things like that, then this passive has even more value and might even be essential for you. But most of the time, this team's going to have plenty of focus and not struggle too much. So for that reason, for me, it's a high 3-star. But again, you might want to consider doing this one if you're regularly attempting really, really big punch-ups. All right, next up, we're going to take a look at the Blob. So taking a look at Blob's basic, when you put tier 4s in this ability, you're going to add 40% more damage, and when he's attacking a disrupted target, instead of rewinding their turn meter 15%, he's going to rewind their turn meter 20% instead. So this isn't particularly valuable. The extra 40% damage is alright. Some of the time he has offense up when he's using his basic attack, but it's not that common. And as for the turn meter rewind, it's rare that that extra 5% makes a significant difference. Again, it's possible, but there's so many other factors that change the outcome of this match based on like how often was Juggernaut attacked to give himself and Blob speed bar, how often was PYRO attacked to give himself speed bar, were there crits for MAGNETO to give people speed up. So seeing as you don't typically use this until later in the match, and it's almost impossible to plan around where all the speed bars are going to be by the time you're using this ability, and the fact that it's only 5%, it ends up not making a crazy difference. So it's not the worst upgrade, but you're mainly just looking at the additional 40% damage. So for me, this is a 2-star. All right, now we're taking a look at Blob's special. So putting tier 4s in this ability adds 60% damage to the primary and adjacent targets. Now, if that were it, normally that would just be a 2-star. However, because he is going to spawn with 2 turns of offense up, that additional value pretty much ensures that this is one of the stronger upgrades in terms of amplifying their wombo combo. So for me, this one lands at a 3-star. All right, now we're taking a look at Blob's ultimate. So Blob's ultimate adds 80% damage to the primary and adjacent targets. And as I mentioned with his special, he is pretty much always going to have offense up for this ability. So it is a really healthy amount of damage. Now, in my experience, this extra damage is not necessary for most matchups. Again, this is more essential if you're trying really, really big punch-ups, but if you're being even kind of reasonable with the power of punch-ups that you're attempting with this team, then this damage won't really be necessary, even though it's nice. But more importantly, while you can improve this team's damage quite a bit with T4s, what they really need to reliably do their job is the focus. So if you attempt punch-ups that are too big, what'll happen is you'll have Toad not removing immunities, or you'll have PYRO not successfully removing defense ups or things like that. So a lack of focus will cut the legs out from under this team much sooner than a lack of damage will. So while this is a very good upgrade, again, I can't quite call it essential, because if you've got the focus to attempt the matchup, your damage is almost certainly going to be fine. So for me, this is a 3-star. Finally, we'll take a look at Blob's passive. So when you put tier 4s in this ability, Blob is going to gain an extra 10% resistance, as well as give an extra 10% resistance to the entire Brotherhood team. And he's going to go from a 75% chance to counterattack on a full Brotherhood team up to a 100% chance to counterattack. So again, this upgrade is certainly not bad. More counterattacks, definitely a good thing, and the extra resistance certainly doesn't hurt. However, generally speaking, what stops the Brotherhood from winning a fight is whether or not they can blow up the enemy team. They don't typically need to rely on their resistance to survive much. It's more about, is their offense going to be enough? And once those cooldowns are down, can they clean up what's left? In addition, as far as the counterattacks, it's tough to say exactly how many times Blob is going to get hit. He'll start off having a taunt, so he'll have some opportunities to counterattack, but he's already going to counterattack 75% of the time. So there are matchups where this will be a little bit more valuable, but again, I don't think that the extra damage is what's really going to push this team over and allow them to win matchups they otherwise wouldn't. Again, as long as their focus is good enough to apply the control effects that they want, their damage is almost always sufficient to blow up all the enemies. So while, again, this is another strong upgrade, I can't quite say that it's essential. So for me, this is a 3-star. Now we're going to take a look at Mystique. So taking a look at Mystique's basic, Putting tier 4s in this ability is going to add 40% damage to the primary attack, 40% damage to the first and possibly second bonus attack, and it's going to go from copying one positive effect to copying two, and if Magneto is an ally, it's going to change to copy all positive effects. So this is a bit of a difficult one to evaluate because in terms of just raw value, it is an incredible value. At a minimum, you're getting 80% more damage. It ends up averaging around 100% more damage because half the time you're going to get that second basic attack as well, so you could potentially get 120% damage. That said, each bonus attack is reduced by armor, so it's not quite the same as a raw 120% damage upgrade. As for copying the positive effects, there are instances where getting those positive effects can be all the difference in the world. There are also plenty of instances where Mystique is attacking someone that doesn't have any positive effects or just has one anyway. So the main thing I look at here is that in most matchups, you don't use Mystique's basic attack until her third turn, and most of the time the fight is decided. So every once in a while, a fight will go late and Mystique's stronger basic will allow you to squeak out a win that you otherwise wouldn't have scored, but most of the time, by the time you're even looking to use Mystique's basic, the fight is either already won or lost. So while I do think that it's an excellent value and a very strong upgrade, I can't quite call it essential, so for me, this is a 3-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Mystique's special. So putting tier 4s in Mystique's special does a few things. It adds 30% more damage to the primary target, 30% more damage to the additional targets, and it goes from 2 additional targets that aren't in stealth to 3 additional targets that aren't in stealth. And of course, she's going to hit all the targets that do have stealth for another 30% damage as well when she's clearing stealth off of them. So in most matchups, there aren't too many people in stealth for her to hit with this, and in the matchups that there are, that extra 30% damage from her is not too crazy. Hitting the extra target for a free 170% damage is objectively a good increase, but again, because it's hitting some random target, you don't really have control of it, and it's just not that hard of a hit. The best reason to upgrade this is if you're running a Marauders team. She goes from flipping 1 enemy positive effect to flipping 2 into negative effects, so that's really strong, but that doesn't apply to her on the Brotherhood, which is what we're looking at here today. So while the value that you get in terms of the free extra damage isn't bad, it's almost never make or break damage for this team. So yet again, for me, I gotta give this one a 3-star. Alright, now we're taking a look at Mystique's ultimate. So putting tier 4s in this ability, it's gonna add 20% more damage to the smoke bomb portion of this attack, which is basically nothing. And then it's going to add an additional 20% base damage to the character that she's mind controlling to do the basic attack. So it adds a decent amount of punch to the character that's performing the basic attack, but it's random who is actually performing the basic attack. So all in all, that damage doesn't end up being a tremendous amount of extra damage. Again, if you get just the right enemy who already has offense up and various other things, and they already have a really good basic attack multiplier, that extra 20% base before it goes through all of their calculations can be a decent amount of damage, but most of the time it's going to be pretty moderate. So for me, this is a 2-star. Alright, now we're taking a look at Mystique's passive. So putting tier 4s in this ability on the Brotherhood changes one thing. She'll go from having a 50% chance to spawn with evade to having a 100% chance to spawn with evade. So in a lot of matchups, this ends up making almost no difference. Mystique is really good at protecting herself, and she can, with her basic attack, steal death proofs, steal regens. I don't have a particularly strong Mystique, and my Mystique has no trouble staying very safe until way late in the fight. She's almost always one of the last characters alive because she spends so much of it in stealth. So most of the time, that evade is just going to allow her to evade what would have been a weak chain or some low damage splash damage, maybe an AoE, but a good amount of the time it's something that she manages to heal up anyway. So it's not to discount it, it can save her a significant amount of damage every once in a while, but don't forget, half the time she's just going to spawn with that evade anyway, and you're going to see no benefit. So it's very rare that having that evade guaranteed going into the match ended up being what allowed the Brotherhood to win or lose any particular matchup. So for me, this is just a 2-star. Now if you're running her with Marauders, it gives her a 100% chance to assist on non-attack ability, so it's much better, but we are looking at the Brotherhood today, so for the Brotherhood, for me, this is a 2-star. And finally, we'll take a look at SABRETOOTH. Let's take a look at SABRETOOTH's basic. When you put tier 4s in this ability, it adds 40% damage to the basic attack, that is as standard as they come. Easy 2-star. Alright, now we're taking a look at Sabertooth Special. So putting tier 4s in this ability is going to add 70% damage and another 20% piercing damage to the primary target. So ballpark 90% total extra damage to the primary and an additional 40% damage to the adjacent targets. So this is an above average upgrade in terms of how much more damage it's going to do to the primary target, but it's not a mind-blowing amount of additional damage, so for me, this is a 3-star. Alright, taking a look at Sabertooth's ultimate, putting tier 4s in this ability changes a few things. It's going to do 50% more damage to the primary target. Everyone is getting a stack of bleed, and so those bleeds are going to do an extra 15% damage as well. And then instead of chaining from 3 to 5 additional targets, it's going to chain 4 to 5 additional targets. So it's always going to hit at least 5 total targets as opposed to the original version where it will sometimes hit that many, but it can hit as few as 4. So this one's a little bit difficult to gauge. The damage that it's going to add is above average, but again, it's not a wow factor amount of damage. There are a couple instances where Sabertooth definitely hitting that last person and doing the extra damage and putting that extra bleed makes a difference in whether or not that person goes down, but most of the time it doesn't really matter. Again, it's already chaining from anywhere from 3 to 5, and so on average it's going to hit 4, and most teams only have 5 enemies, so most of the time it's going to hit everyone. It's only about a third of the time that it's not going to hit everyone on a 5-man team, assuming they can all be chained to, so it's not that crazy. It is an above average amount of damage, but it's not make or break. So for me, again, this is a 3-star. Alright, and finally, taking a look at Sabertooth's passive, putting tier 4s in this ability is going to do a couple things. On turn, instead of healing for 10% of his max health, he's going to heal for 15% max health. And then instead of having a base 15% as well as gaining 15% chance to assist on non-attack abilities, he's going to have a base 25% as well as gain 25% chance to assist on non-attack abilities per Marauder ally. So generally, if you're running him on the Brotherhood, the only other Marauder ally will be Mystique, so he'll effectively go from 30% assist chance on non-attack abilities to 50% assist chance on non-attack abilities. That's best case scenario on a full Brotherhood team, so that assist chance, an extra 20%, is not that crazy. One extra assist, typically not make or break. As for the healing, if you have a really strong, really high red star Sabertooth, it is a good bit more healing, but again, at the end of the day, the Brotherhood aren't a sustained team. So while that's a nice thing to gain, Sabertooth is rarely one of the first to go down, and what the Brotherhood wants to do is blow the enemy up as quickly as possible, because if the Brotherhood use all of their cooldowns and the enemy is still standing and in good shape, then the Brotherhood is no longer in good shape, and the hope of out-sustaining an opponent, not looking great. It's not really their strong suit. So while it's a decent upgrade, it's certainly not necessary. It does not translate to more wins in almost any matchup. So for me, this is a 2-star. Alright, so there you have it. Those are my picks for the best tier 4 upgrades for the Brotherhood. Also, thank you guys very much for checking this out, and I want to announce the winner of a Power Core giveaway that I announced back in the top 10 characters to promote to 6 Red Star, and this was picked at random, but it's an awesome coincidence. Congratulations to Injected, who wrote, "Very helpful and well-explained video. I took Juggernaut to 6 Red Star, no regrets. Helped me a lot in Arena. Now with the release of Toad and Blob will be even better. I will be saving my second upgrade for when I pull someone worthy at 5. So that worked out really well. Congratulations, Injected, on winning $10 worth of Power Cores. Make sure to PM me on Discord and I will get you hooked up for that. Otherwise, thank you guys for tuning in, and I'm hard at work on a bunch of stuff. So I'll leave it at that. I will see you guys real soon. Until then, peace!